Um, I'll be presenting about Henry Clay today. So, who is Henry Clay? Henry Clay was basically a nationalist against slavery, devoted to the economic development and the political integration of the United States. So, he started off as a frontier lawyer and then became a Kentucky senator and then Speaker of the House of Representatives, and then he became the Secretary of State under John Quincy Adams. Um, Although he was a Secretary of State under John Quincy Adams in the 1820s, he later returned to the Congress and pushed for the Compromise of 1850. So, thesis and roadmap. Henry Clay was a major influential figure in the national government of the United States in the 19th century. Clay was a very talented spokesperson who was able to negotiate very well for the benefit of the country. He resolved major issues of the century both within and outside of the country. National relations. Henry Clay was a war hawk that pushed the government to confront Britain in the War of 1812. And in part due to Clay's political pressure, the United States went into war with Great Britain in the War of 1812, and it later proved very crucial in forging American independence from England. He was also a peacemaker, which was evident when he was chosen as one of the 5 delegates to negotiate a peace treaty with Great Britain in Belgium. And this picture kind of shows how he was a balanced politician. He was both aggressive when it was needed, and he also sought for peace. The American system. So one of the centerpieces of Clay's statecraft was the American system, which envisioned a protective tariff, a national bank, and internal improvements. Protective tariffs was very necessary at that time period because there was a really heated conflict, and it will be discussed in the next slide. The national bank that Henry Clay supported was owned by both the federal government and private stockholders, and this allowed there to be a balance of power between the government and the private stockholders, and it was not like a total control of the government. Internal improvements. There are many, but one example of the internal improvements was when the public lands in the West were to be sold rather than given away to homesteaders. So the proceeds could be used for education and internal improvements within the country. The program was intended to promote economic development and diversification and reduce dependence on imports and tie together different sections of the country. And this picture portrays how Henry Clay worked within the United States. The Great Compromiser. So these three compromises that Henry Clay stepped up to negotiate made him known as the Great Compromiser. And the first one was the Missouri Compromise of 1820. It was a result of Clay negotiating settlement between slave-owning states and the rest of the country, which are the free states. So back then, Missouri wanted to join the United States as as part of the United States, and there was a hot debate about whether Missouri should come in as a slave state or a free state. So Henry Clay stepped up to negotiate and make Maine as a slave state, and Missouri as a independent free state. This was it created a very necessary balance where that prevented bloodshed that could have arose due to the conflict. And then came the Compromise of 1833. In 1833, there were a series of international tariffs, but the cotton and tobacco states of the South were hurt the most by the new tariff agreement, much more so than the industrial North. So Clay negotiated the compromise tariff, which slowly reduced the tariff rate and eased the tensions between the Andrew Jackson White House government and the Southern legislators. And lastly, the Compromise of 1850. It was a negotiation on slavery. So in 1850, there was a hot debate of whether California should become part of the United States as a slave state or a free state. And Clay stepped up to negotiate once more to prevent bloodshed. Clay introduced a bill that allowed California to enter the Union as a non-slave state. In addition, the bill covered the settlement of the Texas boundary line and the fugitive slave law and the abolition of slave trade in the District of Columbia. And that picture portrays how good he was at. How good of a compromiser he was. So in conclusion, as we can see in the achievements of Clay, we can see that his work was very influential, and it even has effect right now. The Republican Party put many features of the American system, and they are even carrying them out right now. And Henry Clay also had the approval of other influential figures, as Abraham Lincoln refers to Clay as my ideal of a statesman, which clearly shows how well respected Henry Clay is. Any questions?